This is the eLearning Podcast, episode number 6.
There's not a tool on the market that's a 100% plagiarism detector. Just not there. It's not capable. So what we do is we reference the text similarity detection.
Hello, and welcome to the eLearning Podcast from lmspulse.com. My name is Stephen Laddick, and I'm the director at LMS Pulse. My guest for today's episode is Eric Gibbs, who's the president for North America of the company Ouriginal. When we recorded this interview in early September of 2020, Ouriginal, which is not spelled the way you think, it starts with an O-U-R-I-G-I-N-A-L, it was only a few hours old. Ouriginal is the result of a merger of two text matching and plagiarism prevention companies, Urkund from Sweden and PlagScan from Germany. In the universe of e-learning technologies, the tools that companies like Ouriginal offer, commonly called plagiarism detection, get a bad rap. But in this conversation, Eric breaks down the complexities around detecting plagiarism and, more importantly, verifying authenticity. In short, the true value of originality management technologies lie in understanding how they fit in the relationship between the instructor and their students, as those students learn to use evidence to build strong arguments of their own. Now, I think you're going to love this conversation, where Eric and I talk about why plagiarism detection does not really exist, and why the actual goal of these technologies is to encourage conversations about originality. The most challenging aspect about using these technologies is interpreting the results. We also talk about the problems that come with not having enough discussions about intellectual property in the classroom, or focusing on the stick part of it, the penalties and consequences, rather than the carrot or original thinking. We also talk about the complexities of processing millions of student texts, matching them against gigantic databases made of public and private sources, both decades old and constantly updated, and generating a precise assessment that's useful for teacher and student, all in a matter of seconds, and protecting the privacies of all of those people involved. And finally, we talk about why the problem of plagiarism is not binary, and a presumption of guilt can be so detrimental for the student experience. Eric gives us advice on the right kind of conversation to have with students and children about the importance of finding their own voice and doing proper research. But before we get started, a quick word from our sponsors.
The eLearning Podcast is sponsored by the eLearning Success Summit. Learn from more than 40 experts how to teach, work, and learn online without being overwhelmed. Get your free ticket to the summit at elearningsuccesssummit.com. And lmspulse.com, your best source for news, information, and resources for e-learning professionals for more than 10 years. Get our free roundup of the week's top news at lmspulse.com.
Hello, Eric. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Stephen. Good to see you again.
You know, it really is good to see you again. You were on with me as well at the eLearning Success Summit, where you talked about Urkund and plagiarism and why plagiarism detection really isn't a thing. I'm excited to have you. We're recording this on September 1st of 2020. And so just for posterity's sake, where are you sitting and what's your COVID situation like right now?
Yeah, so St. Louis, right outside of St. Louis, Missouri. Everything, it's pretty much, it's binary. So half the state's closed, half the state's open. Really doesn't stop from everything from higher education to K-12. So seeing some remote, some physical classrooms. I think everybody's still trying to figure out not the new norm, but what is become normal living and the environment for education.
Sure. Is there any, is everybody making it up as they go? I mean, or are certain districts making choices in a certain way? Has the city, county, state level, has anybody weighed in and said, look, we're all following this path, and then everybody's just kind of along that path? Like, what's it look?
I think from what I'm seeing is there's really no one, it's not a cookie cutter approach. Access is an issue. We see some districts have a one-to-one type of engagement or arrangement, some don't. So I think it really is, we're trying to redefine kind of where we started last year or in the spring, and really try just to improve on the easy, fine tuning of the enhancements that we can do, both pedagogically and from a technology perspective.
Cool. Well, good luck to everyone who's listening to this right now. I know I've got 3 kids in online learning right now myself. So far, so good. The first 3 weeks have been great. And so we're going to go from there.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know how to save this till the end, so there's no way to. You're no longer Urkund. You are now Original. So tell us about this exciting new news. Literally, I mean, as we're recording this, it's 24, 36 hours old. What's happened to your company? And also as well, introduce, who you are and your particular place in that organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So the announcement was made earlier this morning. So Urkund, it's really the combination of two kind of award-winning technologies. So PlagScan and Urkend, both in the plagiarism prevention and text similarity space, both European, merging together to become Ouriginal. And that's not original as in O-R, it's O-U-R-G-I-N-A-L-T-Y. So originality is really kind of what we're focusing around upon. So being that original company to assist institutions, to assist individuals, really to find the fairness and protect their intellectual property.
Awesome. One of the biggest aha moments for me at the eLearning Success Summit, where you gave a fantastic presentation, I hope everybody goes checks it out, was that plagiarism detection isn't really a thing. Like, we all think that we do it, but it's not really a thing. Take us through what that means. Like, why, if I'm, student A or student B, why don't you detect plagiarism?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'm about 8 years into working with a plagiarism prevention and text similarity detection tool. And I say that specifically. There's not a tool on the market that's a 100% plagiarism detector. Just not there. It's not capable. So what we do is we reference the text similarity detection. So most students submit artifacts. Those artifacts are typically written, whether it be an essay, an online quiz, a discussion forum. Essentially what we're doing is we're wanting to extract that text and match it against a whole host of content. So these content databases are extremely large. So millions upon millions of periodicals, scholarly journals, archived internet for 20 years, and being able then to make a match based upon that student's submission. So ideally then it's up to the individual stakeholder, being the student as well as the instructor, then to make an analysis of are there concerns that this is potentially plagiarism? If there are, change, revise, recite, or potentially have that tough conversation about what we need to do to learn not to plagiarize specific content.
And are there any stats that you can throw out? I mean, I'm not even sure how to ask this question properly. If I'm an instructor and I've got 30 students, am I having that tough conversation with half of them, a couple of them, most of them in today's day and age? Does that vary along age groups? Are we seeing more of it in, sort of the K through 12 area, and does it sort of peter out in the, the high school, college years?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if we take a generalization and not look at a student as K through 12 or secondary or college or postgraduate, essentially student behavior is very predictable. We know students are going to wait to the very last minute to submit their assignments. We know that most students are engaged with digital content. So in my days 8, 9, 10 years ago, what we would see is a high incidence or a high correlation of student collusion, or actually student matches within a database of student papers. Today, it's actually shifted. So at Ouriginal, what we actually see is roughly 70% of all matches come from the internet. And I think we should actually expect that, given the fact that most content students cite, curate online. Absolutely. And so that 70% content with internet, 10 to 15% scholarly journals and academic publications, and then roughly 10 to 15% of that student match, or that student global repository.
Super cool. What does the mashup of, sorry, I don't want to demean your giant global merger here. What is the marriage? There's the better word. What's the marriage of PlagScan and Urkund? Is it new technology? Is it a new process, new markets? Like, what are like the 2 or 3 bullet point defining factors in this that's upping your game?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the plagiarism prevention space is quite small. There are a handful of players. This really kind of solidifies our place as the number 2 player globally. PlagScan had a very niche market and was widely used in Germany and throughout Europe. Urkund had more of a European, Nordic, and Indian presence. And so now with the kind of the merging of the two companies, you really have an innovation that's going to take on not just plagiarism prevention, but start moving into some of this, a new realm of being able to address contract cheating, try to combat ghostwriting. So there's AI and certain machine learning that allows us to basically build tools to be able to recognize the authorship authenticity of a specific learner or student.
So you just caught me off guard there with contract cheating. Is that, was that then you sort of gave me the bullet points of what those are, where you're kind of hiring a ghostwriter in that? Is that what contract cheating is? Or
It is. And it was Dr. Lancaster termed the phrase in 2007. It's become widely available and widely utilized. And I think I should also mention that while we talk about contract cheating, we talk about ghostwriting, we talk about plagiarism, most students that are good behavior. I mean, there's good behavior there. They're using critical thinking skills. They're utilizing their own words. They're finding their own digital literacy and student voice. But there are a few bad players in the space. And so if you think about 10% of the overall submissions showing some type of potential issue, all the tools that we're creating is basically to build out an efficiency component for an instructor to be able to easily identify where a student potentially is plagiarizing or potentially is not writing in their own authentic voice.
Mm. What's your talk, or what are the bullet points you give to a student? I'm thinking about my 12-year-old right now, right? Who, he's just now starting to get into sort of creating actual documents and really, putting critical thinking out there and actually having to create his own voice. And he's essentially grown up in an online world where, of course, you go and you find the material and you bring it back and,
right.
But what do we say to him about being authentic? Because to him, so much of the world, we're seeing knowledge converge, right? There is a source of the truth for many, many things. And yet there's also lots of dissent, lots of other, not dissenting voices, but just sort of convergence or divergence of opinions and stuff. Do you have advice for those learners?
I do. And Stephen, I actually think of my son as well. He's going into his sophomore year in high school. I would say the writing skill level and the skill set needed to actually learn how to A, research documents, B, be able to actually take that, digest it, put it into your own voice, in a sense, paraphrase and be able to come up with your own citation, or excuse me, your own thoughts. It really is lacking. And I don't believe it's because of process or curriculum not providing that type of research. I think it truly is so easy now. At a couple of strokes of the keys, you're at Google, you're at Course Hero, you're at some of these tools that essentially provide a sharing economy to be able to easily take somebody else's IP or somebody else's thoughts, put it into your own. And, I just don't think there's enough synthesis going on to really, persist for that learner to be able to take those critical thinking skills, to be able to take it in their own words. So it really is an educational time for that conversation, not only as a teacher to student, not only as a parent to son, but also as a peer to peer, to really to be able to understand what is being asked as students write today.
Mm. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. If I remember from our conversation earlier, Ouriginal and your technology, you run in the background. I don't even really know that you're there. Is that correct? Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. So, if you think about, if we go back 10 years, or even if we go back 8 or 9 years, what you see is these native applications that try to enable students to be able to upload their content to the website. The workflows just are not as efficient as what is available today. So if you think about what we tried to do with LMSs, when LMSs first emerged into the market, it was really trying to be a plug and play type of system. Then it became this conversation of, we want to be able to provide all of these services as the LMS. And now we're back to a place where we are back to a plug and play type of environment. So what we want to do is to essentially take that LMS, whether it's a Moodle, whether it's a Brightspace, Canvas, Blackboard, MS Teams, Google Classroom, be able to have those efficiencies to say the workflow is the instructor's going to create an assignment. It's a written assignment. The student's going to have to submit that assignment. And then in the background, what are we going to talk about? Do we want to use this in a formative use case to allow the student multiple submissions to see their own similarity report, to be able to see, I didn't properly cite that, need to go back and change that, and use it as a learning tool. So we really have deeply integrated with all those LMSs to be able to deliver a workflow, again, that's efficient for the student, the submitter, and then the receiver to be able to quickly identify if this is a potential plagiarized tool, if this is an authentic piece of work, and use that within that LMS framework.
You caught me off guard with another thing there. You said MS Teams. So you guys integrated with things like Slack and Teams and, sort of like what we would call like a back channel, kind of these chat rooms as well?
Yeah, I think what we're looking at is where school districts are utilizing their kind of efficiency tool. That efficiency tool would be that learning environment. So Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, being able to actually turn in your assignment through Teams and immediately be able to see your similarity report. So we are, we want to work where our key stakeholders and partners are actually integrating within the educational system. And so we do start seeing Google Classroom, we do start seeing MS Teams more in the K-12 space, and then the legendary kind of legacy LMSs in higher education and post-grad.
So, mostly we've been talking about higher education here. A lot of people who are listening to us right now are in the corporate L&D space. Do you have any play there? Are those your clients as well? Is authenticity in, content creation such a problem in that realm?
Absolutely. It's a great question. And it's going to be a new vertical, a new sales vertical or a new arm of Ouriginal. We are looking into going into the corporate space. We currently have kind of existing clients that have worked with us for 3 or 4 years. If you think about the model, it becomes less about academic integrity. And for me as the researcher that's getting ready to submit a document for publication, you truly want to protect yourself from research misconduct. So the tools and the terminology change, but at the end of the day, we're looking to ethically and to validate the content that actually I've authored or an individual has authored. So the terminology just changes, but it still becomes all about integrity and your own personal voice.
Super cool. Is there only a corporate or organizational solution? I'm thinking about everyone now who might be homeschooling or has a small study group or something. Is there a piece there that they could use, or is this, really got to connect with a school or a corporation?
Yeah, I mean, there are tools out there that sell directly to consumer. I think for Ouriginal, we really don't want to play sides of the coin. And I might be going down a rabbit hole here, but think about being a higher education institution or a high school, and then you're wanting to not provide that similarity report to the student because it's a high stakes midterm or a final. And so a student would go out and procure a tool to be able to check validation of the similarity or originality. Mm-hmm. That's kind of flipping, from a fairness perspective, if our true clients are the students, the instructors, and the administration of a school or of a higher education institution, we really want to make sure that we have a cohesive, fair process. And so that's just probably not something that we're going to be looking to extend to individuals procuring those types of tools.
Makes a lot of sense. And you kind of went down in that rabbit hole there. You talked about, a high stakes sort of a midterm or a final. So are you connected to proctoring software and those kinds of things as well? Or are you a separate piece from that? Or is that a completely different conversation?
Great question. I think, it's something that we're evaluating. I want to say the marriage between PlagScan and Urkund and now Ouriginal allows us to start looking at those innovative tools that would be complementary to a tool like a plagiarism or text similarity detection tool. Is it a biometrics being able to authenticate that user instead of going into a physical exam room to be able to actually complete your final exam? are there ways or are there efficiencies that we can gain as well as technology to be able to engage with that learner to make sure that that student is the student A that's taking the exam, which again would be a high stakes exam. It would not be a formative assessment. And ways to economically provide a service to one of those higher education institutions. I think proctoring tools have emerged as something that's very attractive, but I think it's been more or less in the remote setting or within the physical setting. So you have 20 different PCs that you're taking your test or exam on. You're locking down a browser. I think with technology now enabling us this capability, I think we can reduce the cost for that end user, which is the institution, and truly be able to actually come up with a remote learning tool, which we are so now engaged in.
Amazing. Well, and kind of along that same thread, the school year has just started right now. Most education institutions hopefully had their plan in place, hopefully had their game in.
Right.
But we know everyone's still drinking from a fire hose. There's still a lot of plans being created. What's it take for me to get started with Original? Is this plug and play? I've got Moodle or I've got Blackboard or I've got Brightspace, whatever. And it's literally kind of click, and it works? Or is there a process of integration, or how's that work?
Yeah, I mean, we have strategic partnerships with D2L. We have strategic partnerships with Moodle. We have integration partnerships with Blackboard and Canvas or Instructor. One of the things that's nice about this is we're not taking a tool, we're making it cumbersome for them to incorporate within their overall tech stack. We're also not saying that the workflow is going to be so difficult or the time cost is going to be so high to integrate for your faculty from a professional development standpoint. We literally are taking a 2-minute process to get it integrated with Brightspace, Canvas, Moodle, Blackboard, and essentially then turn the key. Then it's more, the hardest part for us is then taking those tools and again, going back to the way we started this conversation, how do you interpret what a similarity report is, what a similarity score is a high similarity score, a high significant, does it correlate to a high percentage of plagiarism? No. So it's more about the professional development. It's providing that migration tool for a specific institution, a school, to be able to actually then transfer over to Original. And then it's more about just supporting our customer with reliable service, as well as being able to control price, especially given those budgets aren't going up, they're always going down.
Amazing how that is, isn't it? We don't need to go down that rabbit hole.
Exactly.
What's your statement on, from the student's perspective and also probably from the professor's perspective, privacy issues and data protections? Because I can also, not only from, hey, this is my work and, your big brother's looking over my back, but then also we're a research team and we actually created something that's valuable and important and, potentially commercially, lucrative. Where's all that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you take the technology and you put the individual learner at the middle of the process, as well as thinking about that individual instructor that's a researcher, you have to be able to think about, first and foremost, accessibility. Every learner should have the ability to engage with a tool like this. So being able to utilize a screen reader. So accessibility is something that is extremely important to us. And we really want to be thought leaders in the data privacy space. I think anytime you talk about a plagiarism prevention tool or a text similarity detection tool, it gets a little sticky once you start talking about privacy because of legacy issues that have been presented over time. Given Original's position on basically allowing students to opt out of a global repository that the company owns, I think that puts the student first and foremost in the driver's seat. So we are GDPR compliant. We're both, if you think again about PlagScan and Urkund coming together for Original, we are GDPR compliant. So we're taking that same high data privacy standard, and exposing it to the rest of the world. So we are going to be good stakeholders of that data. The institution, the school district, they own that data. That's not our data. All we're doing is actually providing content matches. So we really believe we're thought leaders in this, and we believe that, again, the student should have a choice whether they submit to this, submit their IP or their artifact to a global repository. And so that's the reason why we've taken that thought leadership role. Take
me to the place of a parent as well. It seems fairly, obvious from a student perspective. Hey, I've got to do original work. I've got to do, sort of be an authentic scholar, turn in real work that's my own. From a scholar's or from a instructor's perspective, you're providing a tool that gives I've seen the dashboard, and everybody can go to the eLearning Success Summit, and you've really shown that, you give an example of what that dashboard looks like to compare authenticity and whatnot. We talked a little bit about being a parent as well. What are the conversations I'm having, with my kids, with the school, especially when you're like, look, it's online learning, everything's on, just give me that one final thought about that. Like, how do you talk to parents about why this is important and how this can actually be a tool for good, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I take my own position of how I engage with my son. And then it's when your son's friends actually find out that you work for a plagiarism prevention or a text similarity detection, you suddenly go from that cool dad to potentially not in the same circle of trust. I think there's lifelong lessons that you can really instill when you have a conversation with an individual. This is an ethical decision. And as we started out saying, time constraints actually cause individuals to potentially do stuff that they may regret, just copy and paste because I only have 5 minutes to submit my 5-page paper. I think those life lessons just, they're not binary of plagiarism or non-plagiarism. They're binary in nature of this is right versus wrong. And so if it's something that you can engage your son, your daughter, your friend, your colleague, it's really thinking about what is the right way to go about defining your own voice, establishing your own ethics, and then this tool just becomes an efficiency component to validate your claims. You do want to protect your own IP, and we can provide that type of resource in any plagiarism prevention tool out there. So I think it's more lifelong lessons on ethics and right and wrong versus pedagogy versus you have to submit this because it's part of the academic and integrity policy or part of the honor pledge. It's a difference of right and wrong. And so it does open up a good conversation with those end users.
Awesome. Final question for you is, what does 6 months look like from now? I mean, we're in this kind of normal, let's call it the normal now. Are there some exciting new features that you see coming down the pipe? Are there any game changers coming down, or is the next 6 months of your life kind of, let's get these two companies working together, let's spread the good news, and you and I can have a conversation then about what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always innovation. So, if you think about, we don't want to sell a product that's so cutting edge or come out with a product tool set that's so cutting edge that you're going to be on the outer limits and not really be able to bring back where we are today. Think about where we've come from since March. We've made leaps and bounds. We've got individuals to think about, instead of using the words distance learning, it's learning. It's online education. It's just a component. And this is the delivery mechanism to basically support our education system today. So for us, are we going to have additional outlets or potential new functionality? Yeah, but I think for the company, it's really trying to enable the tool to be successful in, again, as we talk about kind of that cost containment environment that we are today, we are a great economical alternative to other tools out there. So if I look 6 months down the road, I think it really is trying to gain some of those efficiencies. It's educating the market who Ouriginal is, and then being able to leverage that human capital that we have, the brains behind Stockholm, the brains behind Cologne, to really be able to deliver a first-class academic integrity tool. And is it going to be proctoring? Maybe. Is it going to be digital exams? That would be exciting. But I can tell you that the market is actually leading us. We have to be able to actually tailor solutions to where the market is today. And so if you look at where we were in March, you look at where we are today, it's pretty hard to be able to identify what the market's going to tolerate and need come January.
Super cool. Eric, just like our talk in the eLearning Success Summit, such on point, and I'm really excited for your next adventure here, or the evolution of your adventure here, going from Urkund to Ouriginal. Thank you so much for being on the show, and I look forward to reconnecting with you in a little while.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thanks again for tuning into today's episode of the eLearning Podcast. If you like what you've learned today in this episode, I encourage you to either follow us or subscribe to us on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. And please do share this episode with one or two of your colleagues or friends. Also, I just want to remind you that you can level up your online learning game with all of the information that's available at the eLearning Success Summit. You can get your free ticket at elearningsuccesssummit.com. And finally, you can also stay up to date on everything that's important, all the news and the resources for e-learning professionals at lmspulse.com. Get our free newsletter by just going to lmspulse.com today. Thanks again.